I thought maybe it'd be much more cool than some kind of lecture or a talk or a workshop to just show what this is. But then there was an issue of who's crazy enough to do this with me. So then I thought of this guy, and I was like, hey, are you crazy enough to do this with me? Yeah, sure. Yeah, so thank you for it.
Of course.
We've already between us established some ground rules in terms of what's okay to talk about, what's okay to touch on. We know each other quite well, so he's very comfortable with being like, I'm not going to talk about that, and I can say that's totally fine. But other things for all of you to keep in mind is that this is only a representation. So obviously, it's not going to be a perfect mirror for your own, number one, because this is not you. But number two, there's an audience here. So there's a lot of different ways that different settings, people's eyes being on you, so on and so forth, will subtly color what you say and what you do and how you feel. Just a thing to bear in mind a little bit. And hopefully, in terms of what is said and what is talked about between us, you can all have a lot of grace for a person who's sticking his neck out, sitting up here. Please try not to have any reactions, like gasps. Oh my God, or like, boo! You know, nothing like that, please. Try to restrain yourself. If you can't restrain yourself, you can walk out and have a reaction. I understand that sometimes those things happen. And I think that's all I wanted to say before getting us started. Oh, the headphones. These are here because at certain points, one of us will go like this. And if anybody's familiar with American sports, this means timeout, which means the other person puts the headphones on. The person who did this will narrate something. Usually that will be me. I'll put on the headphones and explain why I asked the question, what I think is going on, how I'm confused and don't know what's going on, stuff like that, which could be a cool Shakespearean addition to this whole experience. This is unscripted, by the way. I don't know what he's going to say. We know the general idea. We don't have the solution in mind. Okay. Any questions before we start? What do you want to talk about today?
We really appreciate the time. One of the main things that I've noticed, personally and professionally, is difficulty making big decisions, life decisions, and a lot of procrastination around those decisions. And noticing that the momentum of a typical work week or the momentum of just everyday life, it's been an issue in various phases throughout life, even from early adulthood. When it comes to a time to make a big decision, personally and professionally, there's a lot of momentum in what I'm doing as is that stops me making that big decision, or it takes me lots of effort, lots of iterations to make believable, to make a decision. I think a lot of it is to do with core fundamental beliefs around effort, what risk I'd be taking on, what effort I'd be taking on to make those changes. What I'd really like to get better at is not wasting so much time, not wasting so much energy in thinking and overthinking. Making big decisions results in procrastination a lot of the time. This isn't just a purely rational process. I don't want to just think about it logically, come up with a series of steps and say, yeah, that's what I need to do. There's something quite, I think there's something quite somatic about feeling good with a decision about what other non-intellectual knowledge is telling me. So what in particular feeling, fear, intuition is telling me as well. So it's not just a purely heady process. There might be a gut, there might be a heart type feeling. A lot of the difficulty is not knowing which area to listen to, whether it's a more rational voice or more of a I'd love to do this kind of voice. So that's what I've been stuck on. It's not just one particular thing. It might be making a switch from, so I'm in consulting at the moment, I'm a product manager, making a switch from consulting into full-time coaching. At the end of our coaching training, I found it really difficult to make the leap into full-time coaching. For many reasons, stability being one of them. I think that's a really good use case, a really good example of 2 years ago. Not sure if I did or didn't make the right decision, I've carried on coaching part-time, having a big decision to face, leaning into procrastination, and then defaulting to this kind of easy or familiar or stable. And underneath that are beliefs about stability or money or security.
So you say procrastination. What does that mean to you in this context?
So I might spend an afternoon journaling or thinking about associated making some progress. I hadn't thought in that way before, asking myself a few questions, and then putting it to one side, forgetting about it, even coming back to it 1, 3 months, 6 months later, and then facing the same issue again. So I might have figured out the answer on some level, but emotionally I just wasn't ready to take that step. I wasn't willing to go there. There was like some effort. I wouldn't just call it effort block, but there was just some sort of block, whether it was a belief, a feeling, an emotion. And oftentimes it isn't just a rational block. So for example, the coaching thing, I was doing it part-time, the numbers probably didn't stack up to do it full-time, and it's not just a rational thing to say the trade-off of the risk versus the reward is worth it or not. It was more like, oh, the familiar stable thing was to go back to consulting.
So if I say something like, what you're doing right now sounds like the perfect thing. You have stability by being a consultant and you're coaching on the side.
Yeah.
That's a great world, right?
Yeah, so what I haven't touched upon is where I'd like to go, what I'd like to change. That's just one example, but imagine lots of people would have ambitions, or lots of people would have a dream, lots of people would have targets or goals, some sort of I want to be over there feeling or idea. For me, it's not so clear-cut OKRs, goals. It's more of this is the lifestyle I'd like, this is the values I'd like to embody, and that comes with a lifestyle, that comes with how you move through the world, a philosophy like EA, having impact, having an effective impact, focusing on the right things. So for me, it's about how do I make a series of decisions throughout life and be self-trusting enough to make those decisions without falling foul of fear, falling foul of defaulting to the path I'm kind of already on. I've got a metaphor for this. The metaphor is sort of, if I was a satellite in the orbit of the coaching world, the planet was the coaching world, in the coaching training that we did a couple of years ago, trying to land directly on the planet would burn up in the atmosphere. So I'd bounce back up and come to an orbit, and that's what I've done for the last year, is stay in orbit of this coaching world while still sort of maintaining the life of consulting. So my metaphor is, what do I want to do with that satellite? Do I want to keep orbiting this world? Do I want to drift off? Because at the moment it feels like the satellite's burning through a holding pattern. So the narrative that you've got the best of both worlds doesn't quite satisfy it, because on some level it's expending too much energy doing two things, moonlighting as a coach and then having a full-time job. The question is what to do with my orbit. What do I want to surround myself with? What do I want to expend my energy on?
Okay.
I'll put the headphones on.
Headphones. Headphone time. Can you hear me? Can't hear me. It says you can't hear me. Okay, so a couple things I want to point out here. The first thing that some of you might have noticed is I'm just trying to get a sense of how he's interpreting things. And there's an issue that always comes up in terms of bad advice or coaching that's missing the mark, which is you hold your own concepts and how the world works. You think that you're interpreting what they're saying in a certain way, and then you try to fashion some kind of solution for them. But the problem is that it can have high variance in terms of how much it connects to how they actually think. He says the word stability. He says the word procrastination. If you really think about what stability could mean, it could mean so many things, right? Procrastination too. If I assumed I knew what he was talking about and rushed to build a picture and then tried to offer him some solutions really quickly, that would probably be pretty inaccurate. So usually in sessions I spend a fair amount of time being like, well, what do you mean when you say that? And okay, well, hold on a second, you say that these things connect and this means that, but I don't see how that connects. Can you? And I'm trying to step into his mind and be like, okay, how do these things really relate to each other? How does he view himself in relation to that? And then the second thing would be the metaphor. So when a person volunteers a metaphor, if you're working with them, metaphors can be pretty extraordinary in terms of how much information at different layers they can hold, a lot of which you're not even explicitly aware of. So if you say, I feel like a rat that's trapped in a cage, but the cage has these little holes, they're not big enough for me to crawl through, so I have to dig at them to make the holes bigger. That can sound just like some story. But actually those stories can connect pretty concretely and clearly with real things in life. Maybe the little hole is a kind of opportunity that you need to keep scratching it. And so he brought up the metaphor. I might pursue that too because it could be related. Okay. So I want to ask a question about stability. What is that? Just money?
Very synonymous to me. Very synonymous. When I think of stability, and I try to boil it down to fundamentals, I think of Maslow's and think of shelter, food. I think there's some givens there that privilege has allowed us to have. But I think the reason why it feels fundamentally similar to money is another element of all of this is authority figures. I don't want to narrate the voice in my head and narrate my beliefs at some fundamental core levels. So I'm still around some of those authority figures still that have insecurities about money that I still intrinsically I've made aware and explicit in my mind, my narratives. We've done some deep work around some of those narratives, maybe not about money, but it sounds like I'm blaming these authority figures. But I can see the conditioning elements of why holding on to money would be one core pillar of stability. If I didn't have a financial buffer or a job, I don't understand what's past that point. So like working in quite an entrepreneurial environment, I can see the fallout in a professional way, what lack of financial stability could do. I think it's more of a authority figure that makes money so intrinsically tied with stability. But yeah, the other bits of stability, food, shelter, warmth, love, affection, in the Maslow kind of sense, I think I just take it for granted.
Another type of stability that I was thinking of might have been shared social identity stability. So you might feel if you're taking some kind of step outside of what a lot of people in your life expect, that could render some of your relationships unstable. Is that a bit at play?
Yeah, I think that does resonate. It reminds me of something. I'm just going to write that down, shared social identity. In the sort of regular circles that I'd be in, the questions I'd have when I started coaching is, oh, what is that? I don't understand it. Or you're still working, right? It's the expectation that you have a certain lifestyle they would recognize. That then reflects your own feelings of what stability should be.
Okay. If you could switch to coaching tomorrow and you were making a reasonable amount, let's say the median income in the UK, do you feel like you'd still feel too unstable?
I don't think so.
Would there be any elements of that instability? Still?
Yeah, I'm just trying to picture it. So
Yeah, take your time.
I think a lot of this comes down to what lifestyle I could imagine. Family, kids, buy a house, get a mortgage, you know, kind of what the bread and butter life could look like based on other role models, other older people. I think the narrative of you need to pay your bills, your mortgage, X amount of money would require, and I haven't pinpointed exactly what that buffer should be. When we say a median coaching salary, I think it's more of an irrational belief or fear that if I wanted to lean more into providing for my kids or having a nice house, having some luxuries in life, and then filling my other values, having impact, being altruistic, in some ways being unsatiable kind of need some sort of financial stability. And I think the crux of this question is, well, how much do you need to be stable emotionally, financially, when it comes to that?
So how much do you need?
I honestly don't know, and it's so I've read things on 80k, which is like, your happiness tapers off at a certain point, after like the 50,000-60,000 mark, and even the British tax system. I'm like, this is so stupid. You're working extra hard to get taxed at 40% plus. So for me, it doesn't make sense to be earning silly amounts of money beyond like 60k, 70k. But if you wanted the best for your family, the best for your kids, future generations, some of these authority figures that I respect have said, while you're young, earn as much as you can, because one day you'll be older, you won't have the energy, you won't have the means to do what you're doing when you're younger. However, another narrative is, well, I just don't want to be like the greedy, older. These aren't the role models, but other examples of how people have moved through life, acquired 2 or 3 cars, bought a nice house. I've rejected that quite a lot and been like, I do not want to be greedy. However, they have provided a really good education for their kids and things like that. I would like to think about how I can extract without excessive amounts of money.
Is the current amount that you make consulting like?
Yeah, it's completely fine.
Okay, and so if you made that in perpetuity, that would be fine?
Yeah, absolutely fine. And I've
so how about a world where you coach and you make that amount?
I think that would be completely fine as well. But again, I don't think today I want to talk too much about the money element, unless like you wanted to do a meta thing and talk about why you think it's related to procrastination and decisions. Just because it's touching on quite a personal, tender part. But if you think they are quite intimately related, it'd be good to talk on that higher level about as well.
Yeah, let me think about a different way to go. So if and I'll pivot away, but if the money was the same, how does the shared social identity thing work? Would that be a non-issue, or would that still be something you can think?
It would be an issue. Every time you go to a family event or an event around the people I'm with currently in my hometown, or the people I have to socialise with, it's not the ideal shared social identity I'd like to be around. And that's part of the big decisions part, is like moving away from the environment I'm in to be around a group of people or a location where the shared social identity is more conducive to coaching. I think coaching is quite spacious, energetic, the work that gives me purpose and meaning, and I like to do all the time. But when I'm with the current group of people that I'm with, and that's another draw, is something about duty as well, like being with this group. That comes with they feel like small slights. Why are you doing this? What is it? Etc. Expectations. So I do think even the money's fine, so it's not the full picture. So actually, correct, the stability is also about the shared social identity. You need to change your environment, change the people you interact with, be around more like-minded people that appreciate the work putting out into the world. I think at the moment, a lot of the narratives I get is, don't you want to rest after work? Like, surely the coaching is like burning you out. Like, no, after work, even if I'm really tired, having a session with the coach is super energizing.
But the satellite in space metaphor, the thing that's draining the fuel reserves as you're orbiting is the consulting. It's not like the energy that it takes to hold both of these things. It's almost like spiritual drag, because you're saying you get more energy from doing coaching after hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Some people might say it's a passion project, or would go to night school, play jazz music at a bar, and not need more than 3 hours of sleep to then just carry on the next day. It's more the line of work I'm in, the position I'm in, the expectations, and the norms of that company. And I've seen the impact it's had on people as well, which I really care about. I think this whole thing is, how can I make bigger life decisions to live the values that I'm really clear on, I procrastinate to go there because I have other limiting beliefs, or I have momentum in maybe comfort or just like social circles that I'm
Okay. So as some of you might have been, if you're listening somewhat closely, there are sometimes multiple cruxes that can be holding a person structurally in place in terms of how much freedom he thinks he has, options, things like that. And so we came up with the money piece, right, which was top of mind for him as the main thing responsible for his current situation. Sometimes coaching isn't just about exploring the way someone thinks, or being a sounding board, or bouncing things back and forth. It's like, I also introduced this other concept of shared social identity, and that relating to stability. Sometimes when I do a thing like that, it bounces, and people are like, nah, not really, it doesn't really match my thing, but that's cool. And sometimes I'll introduce it, and it'll partially work. It seems that did actually hit the nail on the head for him. I'm not that surprised because I know him, and we've talked before about stuff. So I selected an outside model that he wasn't thinking about, but one that I thought might fit. He's talking about stability, but he's also talking about getting rejected from his family a little bit, and authority figures. Are these things connected? I'm not sure. So I just tried it, because that is a bit of theory that I know of that I can bring in. So sometimes that's good. The idea is not to convince him that the theory is correct. It's just to offer it. Be like, is this the thing? Is that the thing? Is that the thing? Okay, cool. And then it seemed to fit. And then with the multiple crux thing, some can be partially responsible, or you're telling yourself it's because of this one thing. Sometimes it is self-protective to tell yourself it's this one thing, or sometimes you're inaccurate. Whatever the stated reason, especially if it's particularly unexamined, can stand to be poked a little bit. Often it's something else, or it's something connected to that thing, or it's a handful of things. And that's why it can be very tricky as a coach or therapist. The structure that makes this person feel like they're a little bit trapped or don't know what to do is actually three different things. So we need to alleviate along these three different axes. Sometimes you'll try one, it's very firm, can't move it, it's entrenched. You try another one, and it loosens a little bit, and he feels a little bit better, but not much. And then the third one, maybe you get a lot of traction, and you unwind it. And it can really help the other two cruxes sometimes. These are points at which he's stuck. Could be a definition for cruxes. The ones that I'm talking about are, for him, money, and the second one was stability from shared understanding of his social identity. You get to take notes. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it's actually helpful.
Yeah, nice. Okay. In a world where you outperformed your expectations as a coach, and you made 50% more or something, 50 to 100% more than you were expecting, do you still feel some tension to do with the shared social identity thing?
Yeah, I think this goes all the way towards childhood. There's another thread about proving myself, or proving that I can be different, proving I can be better. There's more vulnerable things there that I don't like to go into. There's a through line of self-worth at the core of it, so proving what I can do to other people, and in some ways proving it to myself as well, as a source of emotional security, like I'm worthy of something, I'm worthy of respect, worthy of love, worthy of core fundamentals like a lot of us are looking for. So even with outperforming financially, the authority figures would still be there that I'd have to visit or socialize with, that would have questions. They'd be like, what's this? I don't understand it. That is quite a vulnerable space where you're almost like your life choices are being questioned by people that you look up to, or people that you are trying to gain the respect of in some emotional way. And there's an inner child speaking from a very vulnerable place. Whereas an adult that goes to prove anything to anyone, I've made it sort of thing. So this, if I can hold two frames, it's coming from that deeper place, like in a child wanting validation, wanting respect, wanting to be seen and heard, etc. I think we won't do it today. It's not a rationalization thing, it's more of a somatic, slow processing. What do you need to get over that? How do you need to be sort of seen, heard, accepted at a deeper level, type of work that would need to be worked through?
This can happen. I start talking and then they're like, wait, I had an idea, and then they cut you off. Being able to bookmark these things and not lose track of what you're going to say can be pretty critical.
Yeah, and just a sort of side comment on that, at work, no one gets it. The concept of management, the concept of growing in your career is very narrow. It's, as you get more senior in lots of companies, you do more management things, you spread across more areas of work. But it's very little that you become very specialised and deep in something like this that holds quite a lot of significance. At work, I every now and then hate myself for proving my worth on the workflow, being like, oh, I've done this thing, is anyone interested in talking? I'm like, why do I need to prove myself to these people? I've got a whole bunch of people in this other world that I coach or around here. I actually want to help people like actually doing things in the world that are meaningful to me. I don't need to prove myself to the corporate management bit yet. That is the world I'm embedded in, and every day the hierarchies are there. And I think it's a rejection of being belittled as well. And I think that goes back to some of the narratives of a younger self rejecting a social norm of needing to like fit in or proving, or like you can't be a cool kid, so you're not one of us. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be one of you anyway. I'll do my own thing. So this is where the IFS narrative might come in to something a couple of layers deep.
I think I'm starting to understand why it feels so depleting to keep orbiting the planets you may want to land on. It sounds like the belittling and the non-validation keeps raining down on you in this environment.
Exactly.
And I think that would be hard for anyone. You say things like, well, I should just not need their validation. And in my experience, even for people who do make realizations about validation and the types they need, those realizations usually end up causing them to reorient to the current environment and then leave it or fundamentally change it, or get some distance or titrate their interactions. It's really, really hard to have some psychological, emotional realization and then just sit in the same environment and be fine. So I don't think that's uniquely an issue with you. Remaining in a hostile environment is tough for anyone. Know that the answer is to always leave it. Having a different orientation to it is really important. Sometimes that different orientation can mean different levels of distance or frequency, or leaving it entirely. Environment, I think, is pretty critical, even if you have built up a bunch of inner fortitude, which it sounds like you're trying to do, but it's just really hard. What about building a thing that is solely yours, that will also be accepted and recognized by your family? You could call it Milan's consulting firm.
Just like, it's funny because that rebel is like, I don't want to prove my worth to these authority figures that I don't endorse in some way. That's a very emotional narrative, right? It's not a very rational thing. It's like, why does anyone need to prove? Anyone? It should be like kind of meritocratic on outcomes or whatever. So there's some resistance to wanting to lean into proving worth to people I don't want to prove myself to, if that makes sense.
Got it.
Yeah, it would be like a older brother figure being like, I'm really proud of you, kind of thing. And there's a part of me like wants that, and is like, yeah, recognized by those people that are those role models or authority figures. And it would be, yeah, it does a lot emotionally to do the validation, for sure. But in a way that another part of me is like cringing about. It's like, don't want to seek their validation, but another part of me is like, yeah, I need it. So there's two frames kind of going on. Yeah.
In a world where, just not saying this is what you should do, okay? But in a world where you accepted that you need that kind of validation, would Milan's consulting be a good idea?
Yeah, it might form a different banner or a name or something, but I wouldn't want to, this is where it gets quite subtle, I wouldn't want to brand it just to prove it to them. I'd want to still be authentic to what it is, which is coaching or personal development, professional development, the emotional work, or consulting experience. I can bring that in, want to or need to. The question is, in a world where I get the validation, what would the title be?
Is there such a thing that could get the validation and be authentic to what you want to put out there?
Oh, for me?
Yeah. So we may have touched on something there. You may have found that he's setting himself up for a really difficult situation by being like, I don't want to entertain the possibility that a very important part of my emotional system is related to validation. And there's a couple ways to deal with that. Like, I was trying to say to him, this is not what you have to do, but what if you just accepted it? What would the world look like? Sometimes people, if you give them a glimpse beyond what they're resisting, they might be like, no, it's actually not so bad, maybe I can accept it. Or that doesn't work. Okay, well then the task ahead is we really need to work on this deeply needing the validation thing. What are the ways that we can loosen that or cause it to be less of a need along the way, or do certain things to get it along the way in a way that's not objectionable to what you want to do. So there's a few different paths that you might want to try. The choice that I made, he talked about authority figures and validation. At that point in the coaching session, you could be like, let's talk about that. But I was just like, why don't I put out a potential solution that meets him exactly where he's at? All right, you're getting the validation and you get to do what you want. Is that possible? I wanted to see if that immediately got rejected for some reason, and it did, which was interesting. Or in a session you can just say something like that and they're like, oh, I literally just never thought about that. I did not know that I could converge these two things. I thought they were always at odds, or binary or something like that. So you can blend the binary like that and offer it to them and see what happens. And what we saw when I did a thing like that was that he was, oh, that sounds perfect, but fuck that. It was like, I don't want to have to create anything, and then that's its own thing to address, but it also means that we're getting a little bit closer to a potential solution there. Or we found an additional element to what's stopping him, which is resenting needing something. What do you do when you need something but resent needing it? It's an interesting question.
I see where T's going as a coach, right? But what's going on is he's looking at some core fundamental beliefs about validation, authority figures, and then trying to bring two different beliefs right next to each other and contrast them, and then seeing how they could live in the same space. How do you dissolve one of those constructs and let both of them, rather than repel, but how do they both exist in the same space? To say, if X exists, Y must not exist. Well, actually, can X and Y exist in the same space? Can I still get the validation as well as have the belief that I can be authentic? At the moment, when I came into it, I didn't believe I could be authentic and be validated. Now it's starting to dissolve. And I think the process takes a few repetitions, it takes some quiet time, it takes some reflection for me. Personally, the theory behind this, I'm not sure if T's actually doing it, it's like emotional coherence therapy. So, juxtaposing emotional narratives that seem resonant and true to you at some deep level. So it's not quite CBT, which is up here, but it's kind of, Don't know if that's what he said.
What did he say? Okay, where we paused was something landed with you.
Yeah, I can explain a bit, because I started to dissolve the belief that authenticity cannot live in the same world as validation. So abstracting some of these beliefs, one of the initial beliefs was I need to prove myself to these authority figures, and that means I can't be authentic. That's belief number one coming into it. starting to dissolve that and be like, can you be authentic and still have validation from these sort of authority figures? I was like, oh yeah, maybe I can. I need to sort of like imagine it, picture it, feel it, believe it for it to be true. And that can be different for different people. For me, the process looks like imagining it, because I'm very visual, imagining it, feeling it, believing it. I might need to imagining a conversation I'd have with those people and what I'd need to say or what they would say back to me. It's holding the feeling of authenticity as well as seeking the feeling of validation and seeing what comes up. So yeah, that's sort of what started to happen as a breakthrough. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. How would that affect your metaphor?
Nice. Okay.
You saw a move.
Yeah, abstracting metaphors is really powerful. I need to land on the coaching planet or move away, orbit a different space, which almost feels like it resigned to the authority figures. Carry on orbiting the consulting space. This is going to sound really stupid, but the metaphor is kind of like you're bringing those two planets together or something. Actually,
No stupid metaphors.
yeah, it's kind of wild. It's not quite it, doesn't resonate to me, but if I'm trying to land on something in orbit, it's like I can't see the planet, but if I'm orbiting and trying to land on a new planet, it doesn't mean I need to abandon where I was previously. Some of this validation stuff does exist on this planet, actually. It's not a void of validation planet, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, but yeah, you still might need validation wherever you land on any planet. And I think I need to do some work on thinking about how fundamental a thing validation is. Obviously, like parental conditioning and growing up. That means a lot of us need some sort of validation into our adulthood, but I want to think about what that means for me personally, landing on this kind of coaching planet for its personal development. So it's changing the meaning of what that planet looks like when I'm kind of aiming for it, landing towards it.
Yeah, it was sort of like there was a rover on the planet and it communicated back to the satellite. It was like, hey, there's validation down here too. And you're like, no, fuck that, we're not gonna land this thing. Check your experiments, check them again.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be any validation down there.
Yeah, that hits the spot. It's like, you've sent a signal down, you're like, I didn't expect that to be there, I can't go there, it's not safe, or it's not what I wanted. So it's not got the diamonds, or it's not got the riches that Elon Musk is looking for on Mars, or whatever he's trying to do. So yeah, it's that communication and being like, well, no, it's actually okay to land, even though there's some validation here, it's fine. It's part of the game or something, it's part of the exploration.
Because we have about 5 minutes left in the first hour, I'm wondering if you can help me with something. Let's say this validation related to the shared social identity thing is pivotal in some way. And I'm not saying solving it fixes everything and you become coach. But let's say it's pivotal. If you could cash that out for the audience, how that would concretely affect things. Do you have a sense of what that would look like?
Repeat.
Yeah, if all this validation stuff related to the metaphor, which connects to that shared social identity and stability thing, actually mattered in this process. And that's a big if. Like sometimes you can have an entire session where stuff seems like it goes well, and they come back and they're like, actually it's more like this thing. That's fine, because the psyche is weird. But let's say it is important and it matters. How might this cash out into your decisions that you're making right now? If you can forecast something like that. The thing I'm trying to offer the audience is we've been talking about spacecrafts and validation planets. A question that I told them is what happens when you need something but you resent needing it, stuff like that. It's like, what the fuck does this have to do with my career transition? So if there's anything you can say concretely about how this might connect to that stuff.
Yeah, I think one thing is I wouldn't shy away from celebrating wins in the coaching space with these authority figures. I wouldn't shy away from explaining things or saying, hey, this is a new passion project. I'm not gonna be afraid of your skepticism. I'm not going to be hurt or upset if they don't get it or if they reject it in some way. So it gives me hope to continue down the path I'm on, knowing that validation is an acceptable thing, but reducing its power. So I'm not craving it. I'm not pretending I don't want it, but actually want it. So if I'm like, oh, actually, some part of me does want it, just acknowledging that fact is fine. It's having some self-acceptance there. It's the same, like that's another proxy for the money thing as well, is like, it's fine to need X amount to live a lifestyle that you need, to have a family, to buy a house, to get on the property ladder. It's okay to have other goals. You don't need to be guilt-driven in a lot of these life decisions. And I think another thing, side thought, is you don't need to have one shot at this. It's not like the next big decision is the last life decision you'll make. You can make reversible decisions.
I have worked with people who start a coaching or consulting thing from the thing that's most recognizable to them and everybody else, and they find clients easier because that's a thing that they know how to do, and then they slowly evolve the thing into something that's more whatever they would think is interesting as they have more wins being a freelancer or a coach with an organization, as they get more momentum knowing they can help people in this type of way. They start to then sidestep into actually the type of thing that they would really prefer to be doing. So that was relating, I thought, to what you were saying around like, it's not a one-shot thing. I don't need to quit my job and be like, okay, I'm a spiritual healer now, or something like that, and just completely pull yourself out of your embedded social circumstances. Those are things that can be etched into too. There's a lot more to go into, but I just wanted to offer that as a potential thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think we haven't really talked about the surface level strategizing moves. We just went with the deep stuff. 2 or 3 layers deep, not like 10 or 15 layers deep. And then that would be another session where we talk through, okay, we've talked about some of your beliefs, how is that going to show up, what are you going to change, sharing experiences of other examples where it has worked, and then how that can help along the path.
Yeah, that's right.
And I just wanted to write down the main sort of takeaways that I said out loud, which were not shaming kind of the validation is the big one, and that kind of reduces its power. And then I think as well, bringing these authority figures on the journey and being like, hey, this is a win I had, and not trying to push them away and keep them separate to the thing, but like being like, hey, that's then part of accepting the need for their validation. You go, hey, this is what I'm doing, you might not understand it, but I'm really excited or passionate about it, and I'd like to share that with you.
Yeah, we would also have other sessions where it's like, how rigid is the perception of those authority figures? Sometimes, some of you may have had the experience, those people who we think are more rigid surprise you and are more open to some things. When you put it out there first, they might meet you. Sometimes not, and that's why it can be a scary thing. But oftentimes we grow up and we just have these authority figures in our lives, these caregivers, and we just assume that they have this fixedness. So we never try anything to see how would they react to that at all. So that might be another session too. So as you guys experience, these sessions don't usually resolve everything and result in like a crazy awesome breakthrough or something like that. Sometimes it sets up the arc for what we will talk about over a series of 3, 4, 5 sessions. And to me, at least in my practice, and maybe yours too, that's appropriate, where it's like not trying to force a breakthrough in 1 hour. What we're trying to do is get a lay of the land, loosen some things, maybe have some smaller breakthroughs, but more important is actually to give that person a pretty good sense of how they're feeling about a situation and what's coming up, and charting that arc sessions or coaching could take. So, any final things?
Also to say at the meta level, there's many ways you can do a session. I noticed, I think when I did the timeout and said to you what I thought T was doing, is just one example of charting where people are going. I was trying to allude to more of a somatic, emotional, thing, even though I didn't go there, I didn't do the work on that level, but you can do sessions like that as well. Doing something in 60 minutes in front of an audience, being extra vulnerable probably isn't the time to do that, because you need longer and you should build up a lot of trust with the person. So yeah, I get a lot out of also being a practitioner. I hope it gives a flavour of why this sort of domain is really important to think about underneath the surface of impact, in how we are human beings, how we show up, move through the world, how we think about work, how we think about life, how we think about our beliefs, all shapes the decisions and interactions we have with colleagues, friends, family, etc. So yeah, just thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. You're the brave one.
I'm quite comfortable with vulnerability, but it doesn't mean like anyone else to. Everyone has their own starting point, their own orientations with vulnerability and things like that. It's not to say you have to go here to make progress in ways that are meaningful for you as well. Everyone has a very different starting point and a very different journey. I think T and Emily have taught me it's very important to look at the individuality of people. So there's some people here that want to be coaches. I think it's a really important tenet, which I've adopted, is like meeting people where they're at, rather than trying to do something quite generic, force a move, force a framework to be the approach to helping them.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. All right, should we open up for questions or comments? What was it like for you guys?